Have you ever wondered why some people can enter a room, say one thing, and instantly capture everyone's attention, while others, despite their best efforts, struggle to even be heard? It's not about being the loudest or smartest. It's not about having the most experience either. It's all about how you speak. Today, we're diving into the subtle yet powerful ways to ensure people respect and listen to you whenever you open your mouth. Some of these insights might make you nod in agreement, while others may hit a little too close to home. Either way, these ideas can shift how people perceive you, guaranteed. Let's get started. Let's start with something we've all been guilty of: over-apologizing. The casual "I'm sorry" might seem harmless, but those two words are often sabotaging your credibility. Think about it. When you apologize unnecessarily, you're not being polite. You're undermining yourself. It's like you're broadcasting to the world, "Don't mind me, I'm probably wrong anyway." You're signaling a lack of confidence, and whether you realize it or not, people pick up on that. Picture this. You arrive 2 minutes late to a meeting and immediately say, "Sorry, I'm late," even though traffic was a nightmare. You've just framed yourself as the problem. Life happens, and yet you've already diminished your presence. Or imagine someone bumps into you, and your reflex is to say, "Oh, sorry, what are you apologizing for? Taking up space." I used to be addicted to saying, "I'm sorry" for everything. I remember once during a meeting someone interrupted me. My first instinct? "Oh, sorry, go ahead." But why was I apologizing for their rudeness? That moment was a wake-up call. I realized my constant apologizing was more about making myself smaller than about genuine politeness. From that day forward, I started catching myself every time those words were about to leave my mouth. Instead of defaulting to "I'm sorry," I would ask myself, do I genuinely owe someone an apology, or am I just trying to ease the moment? Spoiler alert, 90% of the time, no apology was necessary. Here's a powerful shift. Replace unnecessary apologies with phrases that command respect. Instead of "Sorry, I'm late," say "Thank you for waiting." Instead of "Sorry to bother you," say "Do you have a moment?" These subtle swaps communicate confidence without arrogance. By respecting yourself first, others will follow suit. And speaking of respect, let's talk about boundaries. Without boundaries, you're not being selfless, you're being spineless. I know that sounds harsh, but think about it. How many times have you said yes to something you didn't want to do just to avoid conflict? How often have you let someone push past your limits because you didn't want to seem difficult? Here's the thing. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They're guidelines that teach others how to treat you. When you don't set boundaries, you're essentially saying, "Your comfort matters more than my well-being." And trust me, that's a dangerous precedent to set. When I first started enforcing boundaries, it wasn't easy. I remember turning down a favor for a friend once because I genuinely had other plans. Their response? "Wow, I thought I could count on you." That guilt trip almost worked, but I stood my ground. The result? They managed just fine without me, and our friendship survived. Boundaries will ruffle feathers at first, but that's okay. The people worth keeping in your life will adjust. The ones who don't, well, they were probably more interested in what you could do for them than in who you are. Setting limits isn't about being selfish. It's about valuing your time, energy, and peace of mind. And here's a little secret. You don't need to over-explain your boundaries. A simple, firm, "I can't do that," is enough. Practicing small no's can build your confidence. Turn down that event you don't want to attend. Decline that extra task when your plate is already full. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Next, let's uncover a tool so underrated, yet so effective: the pause. Silence isn't just empty space. It's where your power lies. In a world where everyone's rushing to fill every moment with noise, a pause is like a spotlight. It grabs attention and holds it. Early in my career, I was terrified of silence. I thought every pause would make me look unprepared or unsure, so I'd ramble, over-explaining my points, cramming in every thought, and hoping to impress. But one day, after a particularly long-winded pitch, my boss pulled me aside and said, "You have great ideas, but you need to let people process them." That hit me hard. From then on, I started experimenting with pausing. It felt unnatural at first, but the results were undeniable. Instead of zoning out, people started leaning in, hanging on to every word. The silence between sentences wasn't awkward. It was powerful. It gave my ideas weight. Here's the key. A pause isn't about hesitation, it's about confidence. It tells people, I believe in what I'm saying enough to let it breathe. It's the same principle in music. The rests between the notes are just as important as the notes themselves. And let's not forget the art of humor. When used wisely, humor can connect you with others and break down walls. But overdo it, and you risk being the class clown no one takes seriously. Trust me, I've been there. I used to rely on self-deprecating jokes to seem relatable. I thought poking fun at myself would put others at ease, but all it did was diminish how people saw me. One day, after a meeting where I joked about my workload, a manager said, "You're better than the way you talk about yourself." That comment stuck with me. Humor works best when it's intentional, not desperate. Are you using it to connect or to deflect? A well-timed joke can showcase your wit and confidence, but constant joking can make you seem insecure. The balance is key. And while we're on the subject of self-sabotage, let's talk about gossip. Sharing juicy tidbits might feel like a bonding experience, but it's a quick way to lose respect. When you gossip, you're not just tearing down the person you're talking about, you're tearing down your own credibility. I once made an offhand joke about a colleague, thinking it was harmless. But that joke spiraled, and when it got back to them, it caused unnecessary tension. That was my wake-up call. From that point on, I made a conscious effort to stay out of gossip circles. It's amazing how much trust you build when people know you won't weaponize their secrets. So, if you're serious about commanding respect, focus on lifting others up, not tearing them down. The energy you put out will come back to you tenfold. Finally, one of the hardest lessons I've learned: know when to stop talking. It's tempting to keep explaining, to fill every silence with words, but sometimes less is more. When you say too much, your message gets lost. Silence, on the other hand, creates space for your words to resonate. When you master the ability to stop talking, you demonstrate confidence. You show that you trust your message enough to let it stand on its own, and that's a level of self-assurance people can't help but respect. The way you speak shapes how others see you and how you see yourself. So whether it's dropping unnecessary apologies, setting boundaries, embracing pauses, or letting go of gossip, remember, respect begins with you. Speak with intention, own your space, and watch how the world listens. Have you ever noticed how the way you carry yourself in a conversation can either pull people in or push them away? It's not just about the words you say, it's about the energy you bring, the way you frame your ideas, and the confidence behind them. Speaking with authority isn't about being aggressive or dominating the room. It's about mastering subtle shifts that make people stop, listen, and respect what you have to say. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to own your opinions without needing to seek approval. How often have you prefaced a statement with, "This might sound stupid, but," or "I don't know if this is right, but." Those phrases may seem harmless, but they immediately undermine the weight of what you're about to say. When you hedge your words like that, you're essentially giving people permission to dismiss you before you've even started. Let me tell you about a time I learned this the hard way. I was in a meeting with a group of decision makers, pitching an idea I truly believed in. But instead of presenting it confidently, I started with, "I'm not sure if this would work, but maybe we could try." The energy in the room shifted instantly. Instead of engaging with my idea, people started poking holes in it. I realized later it wasn't the idea they doubted, it was me. From that moment on, I made a rule for myself. No more qualifiers. If I believed in something, I would own it. Instead of, "I think we could," I'd say, "We should." Instead of, "This might be a bad idea," I'd go with, "Here's what I propose." The shift in how people responded to me was night and day. They didn't always agree with me, but they respected the conviction behind my words. Owning your opinions doesn't mean you have to be rigid or unwilling to change your mind. It just means you have to stand by your ideas long enough to let them be heard. If someone challenges you, that's okay. Listen to their perspective, adapt if necessary, but don't start from a place of doubt. Confidence isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to stand by your perspective until proven otherwise. Another key to commanding respect in how you speak is learning to simplify your message. People often equate complexity with intelligence, but the truth is, simplicity is far more impactful. If you can't explain your point clearly and concisely, you're likely to lose your audience. I used to think that throwing in big words and long explanations made me sound smarter, but what I didn't realize was that I was overloading people with information they didn't need. One day, after a particularly dense presentation, someone came up to me and said, "You had some great points, but I wish you'd just gotten to the heart of it sooner." That stung, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. From then on, I started focusing on clarity. Instead of trying to sound impressive, I asked myself, what's the one thing I want them to take away from this? Once I had that, I built everything else around it. The result? People started engaging more, asking better questions, and actually remembering what I said. Clarity isn't about dumbing things down. It's about respecting your audience enough to value their time and attention. When you're clear and to the point, people don't just hear you, they understand you. And understanding builds respect. Now, let's talk about tone. Your tone can either elevate your words or completely undermine them. Too often, we default to a tone that's either too aggressive or too passive. The key is finding that sweet spot in the middle, a tone that's assertive but not abrasive. Think about how you respond when someone challenges you. Do you immediately go on the defensive, or do you shrink back and let them bulldoze over your point? Neither approach earns respect. Instead, practice staying calm and measured, no matter the situation. I remember once getting into a heated debate at work. My initial instinct was to raise my voice, to match the intensity of the person arguing with me. But then I caught myself. I took a deep breath and replied in a calm, even tone. To my surprise, the energy in the room shifted. The other person started mirroring my calmness, and we were able to have a productive conversation instead of a shouting match. Your tone sets the tone for the entire interaction. When you speak calmly and assertively, you signal that you're in control, not just of the conversation, but of yourself. And that level of composure commands respect. One more thing about tone. Avoid the habit of ending your statements like questions. You've probably heard this before, when someone says something declarative, but their voice goes up at the end, making it sound like they're unsure. For example, "I think this could work," instead of, "I think this could work." The difference might seem small, but it's huge in how people perceive you. Speak with conviction and let your tone reflect that. And finally, let's address one of the most underrated aspects of powerful communication: listening. You can't expect people to respect you if you're not willing to give them the same courtesy. Listening isn't just about staying quiet while someone else talks. It's about truly being present, taking in what they're saying, and responding thoughtfully. I used to be terrible at this. During conversations, I'd be so focused on what I wanted to say next that I barely registered what the other person was saying. One day, a colleague called me out on it. They said, "You're great at talking, but sometimes it feels like you're not really listening." That hit hard, but they were right. Since then, I've made a conscious effort to listen better. I started pausing before responding, asking follow-up questions, and even paraphrasing what the other person said to make sure I understood them correctly. The impact was immediate. Not only did people feel more valued, but they also started valuing me more. Here's the thing. Listening isn't just about making others feel good. It also gives you valuable insights that can make your responses more impactful. When you truly listen, you're able to engage in a way that's thoughtful and meaningful, and that's a surefire way to earn respect. Communication isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it, how you carry yourself, and how you connect with others. Small shifts in how you approach conversations can make a massive difference in how people perceive you. By owning your opinions, simplifying your message, mastering your tone, and truly listening, you'll not only command respect, you'll create deeper, more meaningful connections with everyone around you. Let's dive deeper into the power dynamics of communication, where subtle behaviors can amplify respect or quietly erode it. The way you engage in conversations often speaks louder than the words themselves, and understanding this can transform how others perceive you. It's not about reinventing yourself, but refining the way you interact, making every moment of dialogue count. Have you ever noticed how the energy you bring into a conversation can be contagious? If you're nervous or uncertain, that energy spreads, but if you're composed and confident, it anchors the room. One of the most overlooked ways to communicate confidence is through body language. It's not just what you say, but how you physically show up. Think about it. Have you ever tried to listen to someone whose shoulders are slouched, eyes darting around, or voice barely audible? No matter how compelling their words might be, their body is sending an entirely different message. Don't take me seriously. Now imagine someone who walks into a room with their head held high, shoulders back, and eyes forward. Before they even say a word, they've already set the tone. I used to underestimate the power of body language until a mentor pointed out how much it was undermining me. During a presentation, I had a habit of crossing my arms and avoiding eye contact. Afterward, they told me, "You've got great ideas, but your posture says you don't believe in them." That stung, but it was true. I realized that no matter how confident I felt internally, my body language was sending a different message. From then on, I made it a point to practice what I call intentional presence. It starts with grounding yourself, feet firmly planted, back straight, and shoulders relaxed. Instead of looking down or away, I trained myself to make deliberate eye contact. And let me tell you, the shift was almost instant. People started paying closer attention, not because my ideas had changed, but because I was showing up differently. Body language doesn't stop at posture. Gestures play a crucial role too. Keep them purposeful and deliberate rather than nervous and repetitive. When you use your hands to emphasize a point, it adds weight to your words. But when you fidget or over-gesture, it can be distracting. The key is balance. Let your gestures support your message, not compete with it. Now let's talk about one of the most underrated communication tools, pacing. The speed at which you speak has a massive impact on how people perceive you. Too fast, and you come across as anxious or overeager. Too slow, and you risk losing your audience's attention. But when you find the right rhythm, It's like hitting a sweet spot. It's engaging, authoritative, and draws people in. I remember once attending a workshop where the speaker spoke so quickly I could barely keep up. It felt like they were rushing to get through their material, and instead of focusing on their message, I was fixated on how out of breath they seemed. On the flip side, I've also listened to speakers who dragged out every word, making it hard to stay focused. The best communicators are those who know how to vary their pace. They speed up during moments of excitement or urgency and slow down when they want to emphasize a point. It's not just about the words themselves, but how you deliver them. When you control your pace, you control the energy of the conversation. But let's not forget the importance of being concise. It's tempting to over-explain or provide too much context, especially when you're passionate about something. However, more words don't always mean more impact. In fact, the opposite is often true. The more you say, the less people remember. I once had a manager who was a master of brevity. In meetings, they'd listen quietly while everyone else talked in circles, then summarize the issue in a single clear sentence. It was remarkable how much weight their words carried, simply because they knew when to speak and when to hold back. That taught me a valuable lesson. If you want your words to have impact, don't dilute them with unnecessary filler. One trick I've learned is to ask myself before speaking, what's the main point I want to convey? If I can't distill it into a single sentence, I take a moment to refine my thoughts before opening my mouth. This not only helps me communicate more effectively, but also ensures that what I say actually lands. Now, here's something most people overlook: the art of acknowledging others in conversation. Nothing builds respect faster than making someone feel truly heard. And yet, so many people treat conversations like a stage, waiting for their turn to speak, rather than actively engaging with what's being said. I used to be guilty of this. I'd listen just enough to formulate my response, but not enough to genuinely understand the other person's perspective. It wasn't until a friend called me out on it, saying, "It feels like you're always one step ahead, instead of just being here with me," that I realized how dismissive I was being, even unintentionally. Since then, I've made it a point to be more present in conversations. Simple things like nodding, making small verbal affirmations like "I see" or "that makes sense," and repeating back key points to show I've been listening have made a world of difference. It's not just about being polite, it's about showing people that their words matter. And let's not forget the power of gratitude. Acknowledging someone's contribution, even in the smallest way, can leave a lasting impression. Saying something as simple as, "That's a great perspective, thank you for sharing," can transform the energy of a conversation. Gratitude isn't a sign of weakness. It's a mark of strength and self-assuredness. Here's the truth. Respect is built in the moments between the words. It's in the pauses, the gestures, the tone, and the energy you bring. When you're intentional about how you communicate, both verbally and non-verbally, you create an environment where people can't help but respect you. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, authentic, and deliberate. And that, my friend, is how you truly command attention and respect in any room you walk into. Have you ever thought about how much power lies in your ability to adapt to the person or people you're speaking with? It's not about being fake or changing who you are. It's about understanding your audience and meeting them where they are. When you learn how to adjust your communication style based on who you're talking to, you create a connection that instantly makes people feel valued and understood, and that's where respect begins. One of the most important skills you can develop is emotional intelligence, or the ability to read the room. Every conversation has its own rhythm, its own energy. Sometimes it's light and casual, and other times it's serious and focused. The key is knowing how to match your tone and energy to what the situation calls for. I'll never forget a time early in my career when I failed to do this. I was pitching an idea to a team that was clearly stressed and overwhelmed. Instead of acknowledging their mood and easing into my pitch, I came in full of energy and enthusiasm, completely out of sync with how they were feeling. The result? They shut down almost immediately. It wasn't that my idea was bad, it was that I hadn't taken the time to connect with them first. Since then, I've made it a point to observe before I speak. Are people relaxed or tense? Are they in the mood for small talk, or do they want to get straight to the point? By tuning into these cues, I'm able to approach conversations in a way that feels natural and aligned. And when people feel like you get them, they're far more likely to listen and respect what you have to say. Another element of adaptability is learning how to speak in the language of your audience. This doesn't mean switching dialects or adopting slang that doesn't feel authentic. It's about framing your ideas in a way that resonates with the people you're speaking to. For example, if you're talking to someone who's detail-oriented, they'll appreciate specifics and data, but if you're speaking with someone who's more big picture, they'll tune out if you get bogged down in the minutiae. Adapting to their communication style isn't about changing your message. It's about delivering it in a way they can best understand and appreciate. I once worked with a manager who was all about results. No fluff, no backstory, just straight to the point. At first, I struggled because I love providing context and exploring possibilities. But when I realized their style was different from mine, I adjusted. I started presenting my ideas in a way that emphasized outcomes rather than processes. The result? They started paying closer attention and respecting my contributions more. This brings us to another crucial aspect of speaking with respect and authority: clarity of intention. Before you enter any conversation, ask yourself, what's my goal here? Are you trying to inform, persuade, connect, or collaborate? When you're clear on your intention, it shapes the way you communicate and ensures your message lands effectively. Clarity of intention also helps you avoid one of the biggest pitfalls in communication: talking for the sake of talking. Too often, people speak just to fill the silence or to appear knowledgeable without adding any real value to the conversation. But when you have a clear purpose, every word you say carries weight. I've seen this play out countless times in meetings. There's always that one person who feels the need to chime in on every topic, even when they don't have anything meaningful to add. While they may think they're contributing, what they're really doing is diluting their presence. On the other hand, the people who speak sparingly but intentionally are the ones who command the most respect. It's not just about what you say, but also about what you choose not to say. Knowing when to listen, when to step back, and when to let others take the lead shows a level of maturity and confidence that people naturally gravitate toward. Listening, as we've touched on before, is an art form in itself. But there's another layer to it that many people overlook: reflective listening. This means not just hearing what someone says, but reflecting it back to them in a way that shows you truly understand. For example, if someone says, "I'm frustrated because I feel like my ideas aren't being considered," a reflective response might be, "It sounds like you're feeling overlooked, and that's understandably frustrating." This not only validates their feelings, but also creates a sense of connection and trust. When you practice reflective listening, you're doing more than just nodding along. You're showing the other person that their words and emotions matter. And when people feel heard, they're far more likely to respect and value your perspective in return. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about handling criticism. Few things test your communication skills more than receiving feedback, especially when it's negative. But how you respond in those moments says a lot about your character and directly impacts the level of respect you command. The instinctive reaction to criticism is often either defensiveness or avoidance. We either rush to justify ourselves or shut down entirely. But neither of these responses earns respect. Instead, practice acknowledging the feedback with grace, even if it's difficult to hear. I'll never forget a moment when a colleague gave me some tough feedback on a project I was deeply invested in. My first instinct was to push back and defend my choices, but I stopped myself. Instead, I said, "Thank you for sharing that. Can you help me understand what you think I could do differently next time?" That response not only diffused the tension, but also opened the door for a constructive conversation. When you approach criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness, it shows emotional intelligence and a willingness to grow. And that's a quality people can't help but respect. Finally, let's talk about ending conversations on a high note. The way you close a discussion can leave a lasting impression, so it's worth putting some thought into it. Whether it's a meeting, a casual chat, or a serious discussion, make sure the last thing you say reinforces your presence and leaves people feeling positive about the interaction. One simple but effective way to do this is by expressing appreciation. Thank the other person for their time, their input, or even just their willingness to listen. Gratitude is a small gesture that carries a lot of weight, and it's a surefire way to leave people feeling respected and valued. Remember, communication is as much about what you leave behind as it is about what you bring to the table. By being intentional, adaptable, and thoughtful in every interaction, you'll not only earn respect, but also build deeper, more meaningful connections with the people around you. And that, ultimately, is what makes your words truly unforgettable. Let's delve into one of the most transformative aspects of speaking with authority and respect: storytelling. Humans are wired for stories. From ancient cave drawings to modern-day podcasts, stories have been our way of connecting, inspiring, and influencing. The ability to weave a compelling narrative is one of the most powerful tools in communication, and when done well, it can captivate even the toughest audience. The beauty of storytelling lies in its ability to evoke emotion. People may not remember every fact or statistic you throw their way, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Whether it's a heartfelt personal experience, a relatable anecdote, or a metaphor that perfectly illustrates your point, stories give your message depth and resonance. I used to think that facts alone were enough to persuade people. In meetings, I'd load up my presentations with charts and data, thinking that logic would win the day. But what I noticed was that people's eyes would glaze over halfway through. It wasn't until I started incorporating stories into my explanations that things changed. Instead of just showing numbers, I'd share a customer's experience that highlighted the data's impact. Instantly, people were more engaged, not because the facts had changed, but because the story gave them context and meaning. Here's the secret: you don't have to be a natural-born storyteller to use this technique. Start by identifying the core message you want to convey. Then think of an example, experience or scenario that brings that message to life. The key is to make it relatable and relevant to your audience. For instance, if you're talking about overcoming challenges, you don't need to recount a life-altering moment. Even a small story, like the time you managed to fix a last-minute crisis at work, can be impactful if it's told with authenticity and intention. Authenticity is the cornerstone of great storytelling. People can sense when you're being genuine versus when you're embellishing for effect. The most powerful stories are the ones that reflect your real experiences, vulnerabilities, and growth. Sharing a moment when you failed but learned something valuable can be far more inspiring than rattling off a list of your achievements. I remember giving a talk about leadership and deciding to share a story about a mistake I'd made early in my career. I was nervous, thinking it might make me look incompetent. But instead, it had the opposite effect. People came up to me afterward, saying how refreshing it was to hear someone admit their flaws. That vulnerability not only made me more relatable, but also reinforced the key lesson I was trying to convey. Another element of storytelling is creating a sense of suspense or curiosity. Don't lay out all the details at once. Instead, build up to your point, keeping your audience intrigued. Phrases like, "What happened next surprised me," or "I didn't realize it at the time," but can keep people on the edge of their seats, eager to hear the conclusion. But storytelling isn't just about holding attention, it's also about driving action. The best stories inspire people to think differently, feel deeply, or take a specific step. To achieve this, make sure your story has a clear takeaway. What do you want your audience to do, believe, or feel as a result of hearing it? For example, if you're sharing a story about teamwork, end by tying it back to the importance of collaboration and how it can lead to success. If you're talking about resilience, emphasize the lessons you learned and how they can be applied to the listener's life. A story without a takeaway is like a meal without seasoning. It might satisfy for a moment, but it won't leave a lasting impression. Now, let's talk about one of the most difficult but impactful skills in communication: embracing vulnerability. Society often tells us that vulnerability is a weakness, but in reality, it's a strength. When you allow yourself to be open and real, you create a space where others feel safe to do the same, and that mutual authenticity is where true respect and connection are born. I used to think that being vulnerable would make me seem less capable. I'd avoid admitting when I didn't know something, or pretend I had everything under control, even when I didn't. But the truth is, people respect honesty far more than they respect perfection. I'll never forget a moment when I was leading a team through a particularly challenging project. We were all feeling the pressure, and instead of putting on a brave face and pretending I had all the answers, I decided to level with them. I said, "Look, I'm feeling overwhelmed too, but I know we can figure this out together." The shift in the room was immediate. Instead of seeing me as a leader who was untouchable, they saw me as one of them, someone they could trust and rally behind. Vulnerability doesn't mean airing all your insecurities or oversharing personal details. It simply means being honest and human. It means saying, "I don't know," when you don't, or "I made a mistake," when you did. Far from diminishing your credibility, it enhances it, because people see you as real, not robotic. Another underrated aspect of commanding respect in conversations is maintaining a sense of humility. Confidence is crucial, yes, but arrogance is a quick way to lose people's trust. There's a fine line between being self-assured and being self-absorbed, and the best communicators know how to walk it. Humility shows up in simple ways: acknowledging when someone else has a better idea, giving credit where it's due, or being open to learning from others. People respect those who are confident enough to lift others up, rather than constantly seeking to elevate themselves. I once worked with someone who, despite being incredibly talented, always made it a point to ask for feedback and input. They weren't afraid to say, "What do you think?" or "I hadn't considered that. Thank you for bringing it up." That kind of humility didn't make them seem less capable. It made them more approachable and respected. Lastly, let's touch on consistency. Respect isn't something you earn in a single conversation. It's something you build over time. The way you show up day after day, interaction after interaction, determines whether people see you as someone they can rely on and look up to. Be consistent in your tone, your actions, and your values. If you speak with confidence one day but self-doubt the next, it creates confusion. If you're kind and respectful to some people but dismissive of others, it undermines your credibility. True respect comes from showing up as your authentic self, consistently and unapologetically. In the end, commanding respect in conversations isn't about tricks or tactics. It's about authenticity, adaptability, and intention. When you combine these elements with the power of storytelling, humility, and consistency, you create a presence that's impossible to ignore. People don't just hear you, they feel you, and that, my friend, is where the magic happens.